And welcome back, everyone, to Double Down with Breslo, where we cover everything going on in the world of sports betting. I should say the business of sports betting. Today, we've got somebody who is a genuine expert when it comes to legalized sports betting here in the United States. Been covering it for a long time as an analyst and a journalist. He's currently with the Legal Sports Report. Dustin Gouker, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on. Seems like overdue that I'm on this show because I've been doing this for almost a decade now. So
yeah, well, you need to have your own podcast. Have you had a podcast on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, Legal Sports Reports had a podcast that I've done. I just stepped away from that, but did about 200 episodes of that one as well. And I don't know, do a Substack where hopefully I'll do some audio, video rants as well in addition to my writing. So
yeah, cool. And tell us a little bit about Legal Sports Report. Where are they out of?
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm working on a Wikipedia page about Legal Sports Report. So, but we started 2014. I wasn't there at the beginning, but it was started in 2014 as just covering daily fantasy sports. I joined in 2015, kind of starting to report on DraftKings and FanDuel and the rise of daily fantasy sports, and just started getting bigger and bigger. We started covering sports betting as well with a Supreme Court case prior to 2018. And then then obviously the wave of legalization around that. We were bought by Catena Media in 2017. And I worked for that company and for a long time and still consult for them on the side. So.
Cool. And everything's only gotten bigger and bigger as time has gone by. It's funny that I'm curious if you were thinking much about this at the time, as you know, fantasy sports was becoming big, DraftKings and FanDuel. It never occurred to me at the time that those companies would ultimately become just full-fledged sports books. I don't know if they had it in mind or knew that, hey, we're getting in on the ground floor and we're doing fantasy with the whole idea that we're going to be sports books. But I remember when they started legalizing online betting, even then I wasn't convinced that those guys were going to be the biggest players. But in retrospect, it was kind of stupid of me not to see that because they already had the built-in player base, and which gave them just a huge advantage over the competition.
Yeah, I was with you where I wasn't sure they'd be able to make that transition either. They were definitely, they were serving daily fantasy as a product that, there wasn't legal sports betting in most of the country outside of Nevada. So they were serving a product that was, as close to sports betting as I guess as you could get back then legally. And then there was obviously all this wave of questions around legality and regulation and things like that. But FanDuel, I'm not sure FanDuel was ready. They were acquired by a large company in Europe that turned them into a sportsbook brand very quickly. DraftKings, to their credit, in the year leading up to the decision in 2018 by the U.S. Supreme Court that overturned that federal ban, they were getting ready for that and then hit the ground running. They were the first app to go live in New Jersey in later in 2018. So I think I was one of the ones who was skeptical as well. But you're right. Those databases, the brands were well known, and it seems obvious in retrospect, but I'm not sure it was that obvious or even needed to be that way in retrospect. But it's the way it happened for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, you make me feel a little bit better that you had the same question I had. So yeah, I thought we'd do a little round robin here of talking about some of the various companies and the various states as far as, where things sit today in sports betting, who's doing it well and who's not doing it well. So when it comes to the states and what they're allowing and how they've approved it, one of the big issues is taxing it, and we've got the same thing with legalizing marijuana. In California, that's a general belief, I guess, that it's been overtaxed and therefore they haven't really rooted out the illegal market by creating the legal market. So what can you share with us generally as far as what you see with the states and where they set the tax rates and whether it's created a problem anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's the place you start is New York, where it's the highest, right? It's a 51% tax rate. If you lop on licensing fees and things like that, the effective tax rate is even higher than that. And you've seen, New York, obviously the biggest market in the United States right now, it has lots of operators, but you're going to see, I think, a pullback because because these companies, DraftKings, FanDuel, and everybody else who's in New York right now is pulling back on marketing. And that's going to eventually lead to fewer players and fewer people being retained because they're not doing the same marketing in New York that they're doing everywhere else. They're not paying to acquire customers in the same way. And, they don't offer the same promotions, things like that, because it's more expensive business in New York, and to keep, they need to at least break even, and hopefully not lose money. So New York's the example. Like, it's, they set records for how much money is being bet and all of that. You see those headlines, but in the background, I think that it has taken a toll on these companies, and they're not trying as hard in New York as they are in other states, where they're still spending a lot of money on promotions and advertising and things like that to acquire customers. Pennsylvania, maybe not quite as extreme, but still a pretty high tax rate in the 30 percentile there. And then everywhere else, a little bit more reasonable. It allows for, more healthy competition. There's lower barriers to entry, so that there's more competition, more sports books. But like, one of the things that is, like, New York is also a limited market where not everybody who wants to be in New York can be. And, that push and pull of all of that kind of makes it difficult for, a fully robust and healthy marketplace for U.S. sports betting.
So when we talk about tax rates, what exactly are they taxing?
They're usually taxing gross gaming revenue, which this gets really into the weeds, but some places you can deduct promotional spending, which is where you give, you say, deposit $500, you get $500 match. Sometimes that is, counted off and not taxed at all. And that's how some of these companies are, trying to grow and acquire customers, is to do that. And, you can then deduct it depending on the state. And again, varies wildly by state by state. In some states, they're also not paying a whole lot of taxes. That's the other side of this coin, is that if they're able to deduct a lot of money from the revenue because of promotional spend, then they're also not really making money for states, which is one of the reasons why we had states, rushing to legalize this over the last 5 years. So, so usually it's revenue. It's, there's also the federal excise tax on handle, which is every dollar wagered, it's 0.25% is supposed to be sent to the federal government because of a long time law that existed well before any of this started. So there's a lot of taxation going on, and I'm sure you and your listeners know it's a low margin business to start with. So, when you get these higher tax rates, when you add on the federal excise tax, it's not necessarily the great business to be in unless you're doing it at scale, like a DraftKings and a FanDuel or an MGM. And then you also have online casino out there, which a lot of these companies are involved in, which is a much higher margin business, and the business that most of them want to be in long term as a companion to sports betting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's another interesting thing to talk about is online casino. All the attention is on sports betting, but the truth is isn't it your view that online casino, meaning basically people can play slot machines sitting in their homes, that ultimately that would be far more profitable to these companies than sports betting?
Oh, absolutely. And the question is how quick adoption will be. There's going to be more than a handful of states where legislation is introduced next year and considered. I'm not sure anything will pass, but New York is one of those states where they're again going to have legislation at least floating around, and whether it gets to the finish line, it's probably a pretty big underdog right now. But that's where it's all headed over a long enough time frame. We already have a handful of states. New Jersey actually legalized online casino and poker before all of the sports betting legalization happened back in, I think, late 2011, started in 2012. And then we have Michigan and Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and a little bit of poker in Nevada and a few other places with a few things. But that's going to grow. That's, we've had this wave of legalization of sports betting. But once the land-based casinos kind of get out of their head that this is really going to cannibalize their business, I think you'll see more adoption of online casino by states and legislatures and regulators around the country.
Mm-hmm. So which states have online casino right now where you can
I tried to come up.
home?
Yeah, I tried to come up with a list off the top of my head. It's New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Michigan, West Virginia, and I think I'm probably forgetting one. Don't have that list in front of me, but it's a handful.
And is FanDuel and DraftKings, I presume, offers the full casino?
Yeah, they're depending on the state, they are the leader. MGM is sometimes the leader as well. DraftKings famously bought Golden Nugget, which was the leader in New Jersey online casino at the time of the purchase, I'd say. So they made that purchase with the idea of making their online casino business better. And even though it is in just we're talking about online sports betting that's in upwards of 20 states now, online casino is still just this handful of states where there's really just there's they're making a lot more money off of honestly per state on online casino than they are there. And yes, because of their their online gambling in their DNA now, that they're very good at that and cross sell between sportsbook and casino as well. Again, I think MGM is more of a top three with them rather than a distant in online casino. They're kind of a distant number three in sports betting right now.
And what do the revenue numbers look like in those states? Is in fact casino generating more revenue than sports betting?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not, I don't think there's any question about that. It's, because of volume, sometimes with sports betting, it's comparable, but generally in any given month, it's definitely higher. It's also not as dependent on the sports season right now. We're in the midst of NFL and football and NBA and NHL starting. This is when there's the most activity, but those the spring months, summer ones, when there's just not as much sports going on, that's when online casino is kind of immune to that, and there's just more activity, and it's a more stable business that you're not depending on quarter to quarter like you are in sports betting, where you're depending on all this interest right now in the fall.
Yeah, so it's just amazing. We were saying that, we're both kind of surprised that FanDuel and DraftKings was able to shift from fantasy to regular sports betting, but they've also shifted to full-fledged casino, which is actually much bigger. And it almost seems like kind of the tail wagging the dog that these fantasy companies are going to end up being the largest online casino companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, FanDuel is owned by an international company, Flutter. That's this is what they do. The FanDuel was bought to be the U.S. brand of that. So it's once that acquisition happened, it was not necessarily a shock that happened. And again, even though they're sports brands, like they're brands that you're familiar with, and if you had like you said at the beginning, if you have them as a DFS user, they're interested in gambling, right? They're interested in sports betting, and then you can cross sell them to casino as well. So it does make a lot of sense in retrospect, but it also, like that online casino pivot, not necessarily had to happen either. They have done a very good job creating online casinos that customers want, marketing those casinos, and just being one of the leaders in the space. You can go back in time 5 years ago, none of this was like I said, this is not written down in stone that DraftKings and FanDuel were going to win any of this, and they are the market leaders, like you said, both in sports betting and now in online casino as well.
Well, it's also actually, in fact, a pretty different market when you're talking about a sports bettor versus somebody who plays a slot machine. I mean, that historically you think of the blue hairs playing the slot machines versus younger men doing sports betting. So how have they been able to cross sell over to a totally different clientele?
Yeah, it's not always cross sell. I mean, the sports bettor likes to play poker. We know that from that's poker had been around a long time. We know that. Also, sports bettors like playing table games like blackjack. That's a large part of that as well. It's not just online slot machines. You can play blackjack, roulette, whatever you want, really. In most states that have legalized it. So, it comes down in casino. I think it's more comes down to product. Like it's pretty homogenous in sports betting. Like there's good product and bad product, but it's the same basic experience. Like casino, I think there's a wide difference in those experiences. And then just being good at marketing to players. Again, like on like sports betting, it's very easy. Like DraftKings, FanDuel, like there's names are synonymous now. Like if you don't know they're offering a sports book, you're probably not really awake. But casino, it's like again letting users know that this exists. Being out there in search, being out there with marketing, they've done a really good job of like having a good product and then getting that product in front of users who would want to use it.
So in a pretty short period of time, America has gone from pretty much Vegas and Atlantic City, brick and mortar, land-based only, to slot machines in everyone's home, sitting on everyone's computer in their home. I mean, that is a dramatic shift. And typically people would have thought, oh my gosh, can you imagine the gambling problems we're going to have if we allowed people to sit in their homes and click a button and every 3 seconds spin reels? I mean, we're going to have a nation of gambling addicts and a huge societal problem.
To be fair, I think we have some research that's showing more problems around problem gambling. That that varies, and maybe we weren't capturing a whole lot of it. It's not like people couldn't bet on sports before. You can go offshore and bet on a number of online casinos and sports books and online poker rooms before 5 years ago or 10 years ago when New Jersey launched online casino. And what I think what softened the blow is, like, yes, at one point it was Nevada, it was Vegas and Nevada, and then Atlantic City came along, and then there was this wave of casinos, I think, that came across, regional casinos and across the country. There's just a lot of casinos in states, whether they're tribal or commercial, that kind of led this interim period where, okay, gambling has expanded. We have lotteries everywhere now. That wasn't always the thing that existed everywhere. And even online lottery, which we haven't talked about, that's ever expanding as well. There's now a company that you can buy a Powerball or a Mega Millions ticket that works with a bunch of lotteries. So you can buy online lottery tickets online, or they offer things that are like slot machines in certain states as well. So there's been a constant move toward this last frontier really is more adoption of online casino, which I think frightens some of the casino industry because they view it as cannibalistic to the land-based product. Although that's really, like, in most of the states where it's been, especially New Jersey, it's been seen as a complementary product that also helps drive, retention. Customers that you wouldn't normally get. Somebody may not be willing to go to Atlantic City, but they might be willing to sign up for your online casino at home, and they're not necessarily the same customer. So it's been fascinating to see, and you're right. It's like, it wasn't like a switch flipped with the online, but like that interim period where there was a lot of growth of regional and state and casinos at the state level kind of set the stage for all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's creating a huge problem with people as far as becoming addicted to gambling or something, I mean, it's kind of hard to know because the person's doing it from their home. And so, how do we find out that a lot of people are losing the family fortune playing slot machines at home? Are you hearing any studies or analytics on that in these states that are allowing people to play slot machines sitting in their homes, whether it's truly created a problem or not, to the point where legislatures might become aware of this and decide, this wasn't such a good idea after all?
I don't know if it ever gets to the point where they would unregulate or deregulate, unlegalize, whatever. I don't think it would ever get to that point. But there's been some studies for sure where we're seeing increased calls to problem gambling hotlines, to all of that. Now, some of that could also be, like these are very prominent on a lot of these sites, and like people who are gambling may not have known that these resources exist and are now finding those resources because of that. We also have people who see 1-800-GAMBLER, which is the most common one, and just calling it for other reasons necessarily. But I think there has been enough research that we're seeing, the wave of sports betting for sure has created some more problem gambling, or at least identified more people who are having problems with gambling. And I don't think that's shocking, but it also highlights, I think a lot of states didn't do enough around like, what should we do about problem gambling, giving more funding to those things. Only a few states have really put a lot of funding or focus on that. And there can and should be done a lot more about that. Again, even, like states have done a lot to legalize just regular casinos, lotteries. There's can always be more done. I don't think anybody would pick out sports betting casino and say, I've got to stop that. Like, because most of these states also have, are running lotteries that are, maybe a different profile, but also have come with responsible gambling concerns.
Yeah. Kind of plays into my theory that I think we should legalize drugs, because there's so many things already that are legal that you can become addicted to, that having additional options of things to get addicted to, I don't think necessarily creates that many more addicts. To your point, there's already tons of gambling available to people. The fact that you make more gambling available, I'm not sure that necessarily creates more addicts. We got to take our first and only break, and then we'll be back with Dustin Gouker from Legal Sports Report.
Kentucky Derby, Woodford Reserve Bourbon is a spectacle for the senses. We give game day a whole new meaning.
And welcome back. We are talking to Dustin Gouker from Legal Sports Report, a longtime sports betting industry analyst. Let's talk about the companies a bit and how they're doing. We've been talking a lot about FanDuel and DraftKings. I mean, do you see are they're clearly winning right now? But let's just start with those two companies, because we also are hearing though that they've been spending enormous marketing dollars, and basically, as far as I could tell, losing money in most of these states when they first launched because the marketing expenses are so high, with the idea that, hey, we're going to turn profitable after 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. I don't know what the number is, but let's talk about those two companies first. Bottom line, how do you think they're doing in the U.S. Today?
Yeah, I mean, number one and number two for sure. I've seen recent research from a company, an analyst called CrossCheck that has said DraftKings, when you blend sports betting and online casinos, actually passed FanDuel, which is a little bit shocking because FanDuel's had a pretty big lead in that blended category for a while. I think DraftKings, has done, like you said, a lot more marketing, even recently. We talk about this like it's been around forever. It's still only 5 years. You should still be in growth mode and not worrying about profitability. This is where I sit, even though these are publicly traded companies where they're also pointing toward profitability. So shareholders are happy, but you should be acquiring customers, maybe not at all costs, but at a large clip right now, because I think we've seen there's a pretty decent amount of loyalty once you acquire one of those customers, and it's been hard for anybody who's second or third tier to cut into that or meaningfully do that. Now that's going to change. I think we've had wave 1.0 of fantasy of sports betting is kind of over. And we're now in the wave 2, and now we have Fanatics joining the party. We have ESPN that's going to launch next week, and these are the two first companies that can come in and disrupt and take market share and do that. Will they? Who knows? But we haven't had disruption in quite a while. We had Caesars with a little spike when they did some aggressive marketing, and then they fell back down. MGM's been a pretty solid number 3 for quite a while, but hasn't really shown any ability to, at least in the sports betting segment, to challenge them for 1 or 2. And Fanatics and ESPNBet are, they're at least different and offer maybe a different value proposition. And I think that's for the first time we'll see whether anybody can cut into DraftKings and FanDuel's lead. And then another one, Bet365, which we hear a lot about, absolute giant in Europe, is now focusing more on the United States, can definitely become a major player in the US as well.
So you basically, in order to get players, you've got advertising, and then you've got, promotional expenses, right? Where all these promotions that they do. So as far as just casually observing as a sports fan, I definitely feel like I see DraftKings and FanDuel out there big time, more than the others. MGM probably third. But when it comes to the promotions and what they're offering, are one of the companies offering more than the others as far as you know?
Right now, I mean, they change all the time, so it's hard to say. Like, I'd say DraftKings is offering more usually as a bonus offer, a welcome offer. I'd say they're probably doing more on retention as well, which is, once you have the customer, having them stay in the ecosystem so they don't leave you, making sure they're still betting with you. I think they're doing more of that than anywhere else, quite honestly, right now. So
yeah, I mean, do most of them a lot? I know there's the first time sign on bonus of $100 of matching free play or what have you, but do they typically also give you free play whenever you reload?
Not necessarily. I mean, this is more, it's not as, the sign up bonus, you can see, what that is at any given time. But I think you see, that's harder to put your handle on, but, I think DraftKings and FanDuel, it's part of why they're doing well is because they do that retention. It's not necessarily every time you lose all your money that you're instantly getting a retention bonus, or a reload bonus, but they're doing some of that and probably being a little bit more aggressive, I'd imagine. Otherwise you'd see, where people, you'd see more of that handle and revenue drift away from them into others. So it's hard, without having hard numbers on the retention part, they're obviously doing more to retain customers than others because they're not really losing customers, and they continue to grow with absolutely acquiring the new customers.
So DraftKings probably still not profitable, right? I was just bringing up their stock symbol and showing a $13.5 billion market cap.
Yeah, I don't think we're about to get there about Q3. All these companies are going to report Q3. I don't think DraftKings, I think they're promising profitability next year. I don't think they turned a profit in Q2, if memory serves. But again, I think them as much as anyone are focused on long term, and it's like this is not a time to just start cutting on marketing spend. They have, I think they have some real momentum. Again, as a distant number 2 to FanDuel, not distant, but pretty far behind. And now they have that momentum where you definitely see that. Actually, I'm wrong. They delivered profit in Q2 on an EBITDA basis, it looks like. So yeah, I mean, that's I would kind of doubt in Q3 again with the start of the football season and all the promotional and marketing spend. There's a launch in Kentucky. They probably hard to believe they're going to be profitable in Q3 as well. But I think long term it's their goal. But if they're getting to profitability while also growing, that's kind of the ideal, right?
Yeah, they've had an interesting past. They hit a high of 72 about 2 years ago, $72 a share.
Yeah,
went all the way down to about $10 a share. And now they're sitting at about $30 a share.
Yeah, they've been at that high 20s, low 30s for a while, which I think it's probably been a little frustrating for shareholders. But it's I think if I'd say Q3 is probably good because again, you have these underlying numbers where DraftKings has in some metrics has ascended to number 1. Again, blended online casino and sports betting, and if they're also going to be profitable for full year 24 on top of all this, then that's a pretty good business model. And again, I always harp on this when I do podcasts and things like that or writing. Like online casino is the wave of the future. Like sports betting is a nice little business if you can do it at scale, but online casino and DraftKings is very well set up to any legalization that happens in the next 5 to 10 years. They're set up to capture that.
Yeah, and so the expansion to online casino, you don't see that necessarily bringing in some other player because, as we've said, DraftKings and FanDuel, they were all about sports with fantasy, so it was only a natural that they captured the business when they went to sports betting. Now we're doing a whole nother animal, which is full online casino. You would think that would be more the bailiwick of a Caesars or what have you, or even some of the slot machine manufacturers. But you don't really see this online casino opening up for some other company to swoop in.
Yeah, I mean, again, they can for sure. There's other companies that can swoop in, and again, it's an MGM overperforms in casino versus a sports book. Again, it's more of a casino brand, right? You think of when you think, I mean, at least when I've always thought of MGM, you think of it as the casinos in Las Vegas. So that makes sense that it's that brand. There certainly can be more of that. And once you get to even a larger critical mass of states, if you introduce a New York, for instance, then you're definitely going to see, a pivot in how people market and their focus, because a New York online casino launch, again, there's buzz about it, but it may not happen next year. That's going to, change the dynamic and how people spend and how people focus on markets and sports betting versus casino. Again, those companies that we keep listing are the ones that, are going to lead. Again, Fanatics, who knows? They have a casino next to it. ESPN, same thing, although it's not a branded ESPN casino that they're going to have. It's the Penn Entertainment's Hollywood brand there. Like if they can cross sell there, who knows? But the dynamic can change. But again, right now the story is that DraftKings and FanDuel are performing just as well as casino companies as they are sports.
Well, I mean, this business is mostly about marketing, it seems to me. I mean, just like you said, sports betting, it's pretty much the same product wherever you go. They've all got essentially the same point spread. Even when it comes to casino, it's blackjack. It's poker's all about liquidity. So there's wanting to have lots of players, right? Blackjack and the table games don't change. Slot machines, those change. But when you're talking about playing it on your computer as opposed to at the casino, and where the box kind of matters and how the game is presented to you, when it's just sitting on your computer, there's only so much you can do with a slot game. So it's kind of hard to differentiate yourself based on product. So if it's mostly about marketing, then every reason to believe that it's going to be FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yeah, and then until somebody brings a will to the marketing, I mean, you have to know it exists first, right? And then once you get them in, you do I'd say casino product still lags in general, even behind sportsbook. It's not against what's available in Europe. The product is inferior most places. It's not, I've been in New Jersey plenty of times and tried the online casinos, and like, it doesn't feel like a real organic experience. Like you're going to a casino, if you get to your game and you like the game, yes, absolutely, slots or blackjack or what have you. But there's still a lot of room for innovation, and that's where casino, you can win in casino. I think if you provide that, this holistic experience where you're really enjoying being in an online casino and not just getting to my slot machine, endlessly hitting a button and spinning the reels. And there's so much more into the casino marketing, and like what motivates a player to play, what motivates them to stay, what motivates them to come back or deposit. It's like you said, when we were talking earlier, it's definitely different than just retaining a sportsbook user.
Tell me a little bit about ESPN Bet. When are they going live, and is this actually operated by ESPN, or is this a partnership with somebody?
Yeah, it's a partnership with Penn Entertainment, who ran the Barstool Sportsbook brand, and then they actually bought Barstool Sports. Wanted to, for several years, ran that as the marketing arm of the Barstool licensed sportsbook, and then they sold it back to Dave Portnoy for $1 earlier this year. And so ESPN they're licensing the sportsbook, the name, to Penn Entertainment to run ESPN Bet. They already have the tech up and running. It's still running right now as Barstool Sportsbook, and apparently within a few weeks we're going to see the launch of ESPN Bet. We're not sure the product will be drastically different from what we already see, but it's like I said, it's one of the few possibilities of disruption, because ESPN, it might be too late for ESPN, but ESPN is a brand, at least to people our age and maybe a little younger and not super young, but it's a brand that matters. And that, if they do a good job of marketing on ESPN channels and broadcast and podcast and all of that, they can definitely acquire new users that hadn't been before. Some of the question is whether they can retain the customers they already had via Barstool. And it's not, ESPN gets a flat fee. They get some equity if they do really well in Penn, but it's still hard to see, can they get, their set a target of 20% in the market. That's kind of hard. They're coming in with less than 5% with the existing Barstool Sportsbook. Is ESPN going to be able to take market share away from other people? With, again, if they don't have good marketing and good player bonuses and retention, that's going to be hard to get there. And then are people just going to say, oh, is this really a compelling product, and is it different, or are you going to get people to switch from a DraftKings or a FanDuel to ESPN Bet? There's a lot of open questions. I'm definitely a seller on they're going to get to 20% of the market in like 2 or 3 years, which is their target. But they do have a chance of disruption, which is, it's an interesting product and brand from that standpoint, in a way that a lot of other brands have not been.
Well, one thing I wonder about, does it mean that they will no longer take advertising from DraftKings and FanDuel's on ESPN broadcasts, and ABC for that matter, and it's all going to be about promoting ESPN Bet? If they went all in like that, then it could make a substantial difference. I mean, some of the commercial spend is built into that. It's going to be, again, ESPN, Disney, obviously the parent corporation, should have a vested interest in doing that, but they're getting $150 million a year just for existing and basically licensing their name. We don't know all the details of how it's going to be integrated into broadcast and the website and podcast, all of that stuff. There's going to be a lot to see in November, December, of like how much they're trying. Yeah. So the actual brand has a launch upcoming. It hasn't actually launched yet.
Right now, it's in November. It's like I think they may even set a date, but it's supposed to be mid-November. Again, right now the sportsbook is operating as Barstool Sportsbook, as Zombie Barstool, as I like to call it. The sportsbook exists. It's going to get the rebrand as ESPN, and again, probably get through ESPN channels promotion. Right in the middle of November is the latest we've heard from them.
And what do you think Fanatics has going for it?
It's a different value proposition. They have a lot of customers of sports fans who buy merchandise. They've given away jerseys for signing up with a small deposit. That's interesting. Can they keep those users once they've gotten the jersey, or they're like, I got my jersey, I'm out? Who knows? But they have something different. They have this relationship with customers. It's different from basically everyone else. You know, I don't know, like, does the Fanatics brand resonate with people? I don't know. People know who Fanatics is, at least. It's a, you know, you again, you think if you've bought anything in the sports world, you probably know that Fanatics exist. Is that
not as big a brand as ESPN, I would argue.
No, but you also have you know, you may not have a financial relationship with ESPN, but a lot more people have a financial relationship with Fanatics. And again, they're using this cross sell of, you know, what we've seen at least a few places, that if you buy something, you get, you know, you can get some bonus bets or some or cash into your sports betting account if you want to sign up, and you do that. So it's all different and hasn't been tested to any degree. You know, they're big on, we're going to have a better product than everyone else as well. And, you know, they have Michael Rubin behind them, and I think they're going to spend on marketing, right? That's
what would be better about their product.
I mean, right now it's not, but I think they've said they're dedicated to the product. Again, proof is in the pudding there, whether they can, offer a differentiated sports betting experience that's better, faster, more markets, what have you. Again, more than just Fanatics, nobody's really iterating the sportsbook experience right now. It is, you bet, here are your lines, and go bet. Some of them are better, some of them are faster, some have better withdrawal and deposits, and all of that, and better bonuses. But at the end of the day, it's not really different. If you can provide something that's more just keeps us sports better there, and is more entertaining. We're seeing a lot around streaming right now, and having live streams with low latency built into the sports books themselves. You place a small bet or make a deposit, you can get access to a limited amount of NFL streams or other sports. That's if you can solve that, I think you have a better product, and that's where I think it's all headed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last thing to touch on is I do want to cover Prize Picks. Fantasy sports site where their big niche is that it's not player against player, it's player against the house, and there's been legal challenges to that. What's the update on the legal challenges?
Yeah, there's just been a lot of news in the last month. It really basically where you can they offer what they call fantasy sports games, but they're the equivalent of parlays against the house, where you can bet 2 to I don't know, I think upwards of 6 player propositions and combine them, and it's called a fantasy contest because of a mesh of federal and state laws. We've seen cease and desist letters in Florida where they said, stop, knock this off, don't do this anymore. We saw New York and Michigan recently post regulations saying that they cannot operate these as fantasy sports contests anymore. They've grown into, the daily fantasy category, which is what I cut my teeth on back 2014, 2015. It's now led by Prize Picks, and then a couple of other companies, Underdog Fantasy and Sleeper, are right there as well. But most of these companies are now doing more daily fantasy business than at least FanDuel, and I think DraftKings is still focusing a little bit more on that. But it's been a very negative time, and it's not shocking because they're offering a product that looks a lot like gambling, and they're saying our legal basis for it is fantasy sports. We went through all this in 2015 and later with FanDuel and DraftKings fought these battles initially, and then passed a bunch of laws to make sure they were legal and regulated in a bunch of state places. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because this is now big business, and especially in the big states, California, Texas, and Florida, which do not have legal sports betting as we sit here. There's an ongoing case where we might get Florida sports betting soon. But California and Texas are the big prizes. None of these companies, DraftKings and FanDuel, are offering their traditional daily fantasy contests, but they're not offering anything that's even really close to sports betting. And these companies are serving basically the 2 largest populations in the country, and getting users and driving a lot of revenue. Again, Prize Picks is pretty busy, and Underdog are pretty big business right now as we sit here. And this wave of bad regulation for them is certainly not good for that business and what we're going to see moving forward.
So, and I presume there are court cases going on involving Prize Picks?
I don't think there's actually a court case as we sit here. There's just been a lot of regulatory news. Again, the only thing it's not even a court case, but Florida regulator said cease and desist. They sent it to 3
and what did Prize Picks do in these circumstances?
Nobody left. And then New York, same thing. Again, we just had rules published saying anything that quote unquote mimics sports betting and proposition betting, basically targeting these companies, you can't operate as a fantasy sports company here. One of them, Sleeper, which is one of the bigger ones, did pull out. Prize Picks, Underdog, and a few others, at least as far as I know, have not pulled out of New York. And there's other states too that have said the same thing, and they haven't necessarily, smaller states like Wyoming have said the same thing. So
and they didn't pull out of Florida either, you said?
Nobody as again, as I sit here, I don't think anybody's pulled out of Florida. I think that's it's too big of a state for them to do that. What their justification is, maybe they're waiting for actual court action or somebody to say, or the attorney general to say, stop it, because cease and desist letter sounds pretty bad, but it's only, it came from the gaming regulator who doesn't necessarily have enforcement power over that. So it'll be interesting that they continue, but it's just been, kind of a last month or two has been a wave of bad news for that industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't think it's too surprising. I mean, the idea that fantasy could not be player against player, it could be player against the house. I know it's kind of complicated, the laws in this area, but it's all based. Fantasy is legal because it's supposed to be skill based, and I think the skill was supposed to be outsmarting the other players in who that you pick. And so this is saying, oh, I'm outsmarting the house, but that's what sports betting is. So
I mean, there's this push and pull between gambling and fantasy, where like the fantasy laws and the game of skill laws don't have anything about game against the house or peer to peer. It doesn't matter really. The big one is the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act of 2006, where this fantasy sports carve out, which is why we have DraftKings and FanDuel. They saw that and like, oh, we should be offering peer-to-peer contests. It doesn't actually say can't do it against the house. If it's a quote unquote game of skill, that's the legal basis. And again, most of the states don't have actual laws about DFS.
Right, but how is it more a game of skill to say over under yards passing for a quarterback versus over under total points in the game?
There's no difference. You're preaching to the choir. This is 100% gambling that's using fantasy game of skill laws across the country as a legal justification. It's you can go to these sites and Prize Picks and Underdog. You can do a parlay. You can do the same parlay at DraftKings, FanDuel, or any of these sites. It's on player Mahomes over 1.5 touchdowns. You have to parlay two of them.
I mean, look, you could make the argument that sport, all of sports betting is a game of skill.
Absolutely.
You could argue
it's
it
because
way.
it's called gambling, you can't, because if you said, oh, I'm like, and you get this little bit of separation because you call it fantasy, right? And you have the UIGA over it, the federal law. Yes, it's all trying to offer a sports betting product under the guise of other laws. It may or may not be legal depending on how the laws are interpreted. In some places, we haven't had anybody say anything. Again, California and Texas, we haven't necessarily had. It's not that clear. There's a game of skill. There's a game of skill. It's a game of skill. You just can't say you can't say I'm going to open up a sports book, because then you obviously get shut down tomorrow, because gambling is illegal in most states unless it's formally legalized and regulated.
All right, Dustin. Well, you're right. We should have had you on a lot sooner. Enjoyed the discussion. You are certainly knowledgeable in the industry, in the sports betting industry. So I greatly appreciate you coming on. Double down, and we'll love to have you on again soon.
Cheers. And if I have a Substack where I write about all these issues all the time, closing line at substack.com.
Closing line at substack.com.
.substack.com. Or you go to Substack and look for my name.
Okay. Dustin Gouker from Legal Sports Report. Appreciate you being on the show, and thank you all for watching and listening to Double Down. We'll be back soon with another episode. Take care.
I want you to smash that like button.